Basically start off with the basics. We're going to go over what to look for, also some battery maintenance. All right, most important thing is when you're prepping your bike for the spring to go riding are the two things it rolls on, are your tires. Those are the most important thing on the bike because it's what holds the bike to the road. If the tire is underinflated, it's going to heat up too fast. It's also going to wear out. It's also going to make the bike feel really weird when you're going in and out of corners. So the most important thing is to check the tire pressures. Now, most of you should have a tire pressure gauge either like this or like this. On most motorcycles, it'll actually state what the tire pressure is supposed to be around on the right side, where, sorry, this is my left, or where the chain is, or on the swing arm, and it tells you what the tire pressure should be, whether it's in kilopascals or pounds per square inch. Most bikes, it's on there. If you're riding a cruiser and you're riding with most of the time, if you're riding with two people or more with luggage, you may want to increase the tire pressure a little more than what is actually stated on the bike. The bike will actually state whether if it's under 270 kilograms or over 270 kilograms on what the tire pressure should be. That is the most important part. The other thing you want to do is, before you start it, is also to wash, get all the dirt off of it, and make sure it's nice and clean. There are some really cool products on the market. One is motorcycle wash. We use this in the shop. Just spray it on and wash it off with a hose. The other one is S100. S100 I think is the best one on the market. You spray it on your bike, totally dry, let it sit, then spray it off, and it comes out almost looking like this. Next is your chain. You want to lubricate that. There may be some rust on it from if you have a chain drive bike. If you have a shaft drive bike, you don't really need to worry about it. You may want to just pull the cap off to make sure there's oil in it, and then you're good to go. If you do have a chain drive bike, the best way to do it is if it's on a stand. They call these padcock stands. Now the benefit to this is that the back tire is off the ground. You just have to get your chain lube, roll the tire, and spray the inside of the chain on both sides, and then also on the outside of the chain. That way the lubricant will actually be able to go in and get the O-rings and rollers in the chain so that they'll free up or prevent them from seizing. Next thing is you want to check all the fluids, making sure that you have brake fluid, coolant, engine oil. On the Triumph they actually use a dipstick right down there. All the Kawasaki's use a sight window. Except for the 1700, which uses a dipstick. Most of them will have either a dipstick or a sight glass so that you can tell how much oil you have in it. If you changed your oil in the fall, you're good for about 2,500 kilometers. If you haven't changed your oil and you put it away with dirty oil in it, it is recommended that you change the oil at the time of prepping your bike, but not after. Change it after you've started the motorcycle so that the bike has gotten warm enough and all that dirt and debris is sitting in the oil and it can actually come out. If you do change your oil, there are some things on the market. You can get little drain pans. These are filter cups. Make things a lot easier instead of using a big pair of channel locks. Or what some people have done is, what you may have to do is drive a big screwdriver through it and crack it loose. You're changing it, right? So it doesn't really matter. Next thing, you want to put your battery in. There are two types of batteries. This is the old lead acid battery. These do need maintenance. Now, right now, you can see there's a low line and a high line. If it's looking like that, I know the battery's on an angle, but make sure that it's sitting level, and they all should be at the top of this line right here. If they are not, there's little caps right here that you can either pull off or unscrew. These ones unscrew, and then just top them up with a distilled water. Try not to use tap water because tap water has impurities in it which will affect the life of the battery. A battery typically will last anywhere from 5 to 7 years, whether it's this one or maintenance free. If you have a battery tender, they'll tend to last the longer side. If you have just an ordinary charger or not charging it and just going out and starting it once a month, that's going to affect the battery because it could tend to freeze. Because what will happen is that the acid will turn to water and then it's sitting in your garage or somewhere cold and it will actually freeze it. And what happens is what the battery does freeze, it'll have a bubble on it, either on the side, the front, or even worse, it may even crack. And then your battery's done. The beauty about maintenance free is it doesn't matter whether you put it like this, even like that. Because what's inside of here is not a liquid, it's a gel. There's 2 little vent holes, one right there and one on that side, and that's all it needs. With the lead acid battery, it has to be sitting straight up. If it sits on an angle, all the acid is going to pour out. And what happens is when the acid pours out, it can actually eat your frame away. And then your bike, you have to bring it in and buy a new one. Or kick it to the curb.
What is the difference in the price for the battery?
They're typically about, these are $100+. Those are like 50 and up. So they are a lot more, but you have all the newer bikes are going with a maintenance-free battery because you don't need to add fluid. Once it's filled from the factory or from the dealer, it's good to go. Especially if you use a battery tender. Now the reason why we push battery tenders is that these have microprocessors in them, little brains or computers, and the benefit to that is that your typical 1 amp charger will constantly put 1 amp of power into the battery, and it can tend to boil your battery because it doesn't know when your battery is full or when it's empty. It's like when you leave your tap on and you walk away from your bathtub, the water keeps flowing, it doesn't know whether it's full or not. The same thing with a battery tender is that the microprocessor will sense that when the battery gets below 11.7 volts, it comes on and charges the battery up to 12.3 volts. And once it gets to 12.3 volts, it shuts off. So you typically can have, there's 2 leads that you can put on the battery and have a little plug hanging here, plug it into the wall and forget it. When it comes time to start your bike, you come in, turn the key on and start it. The battery is good to go. Now the benefit to that is that, say you want to start your bike today, but you're not going to be riding it for a while because there's still snow on the ground, right? What happens is you put your battery in, you've charged it, you put your battery in, you start the bike, and you check everything, and everything's good. Well, 6 weeks rolls around, you go to try and start your bike, and the battery's dead. You think that there's something wrong with the battery, but there isn't. It's just because the battery hasn't had any charge to it for 6 weeks. A battery will lose power every week it's not used. That's why these are fantastic, because even if you do start, when you do start it now, and you want to leave it for 6 weeks, you just plug it into the wall, and it'll maintain the battery forever. So this is something that you'll use year round. I'm going to put the battery in because you may not have a battery tender. There's only one way to put the battery in. Connect the positive first and then the negative. So you want to, when you're starting off at the spring, you want to start off positive and finish with negative. And in the fall, you want to disconnect the negative and then disconnect the positive. You want to end with a positive. But we're starting at the beginning of the year, so you want to start off with a positive, and that is connect the positive first. The benefit to that is that connecting the positive, you can actually touch your screwdriver to the frame of the bike and nothing will happen. If you did the negative first, you could actually short out your computer because it's putting too much power and the computer doesn't understand it. And an ECU for most bikes is anywhere from $1,000 to $2,600. Let the batteries in, you want to put the key in the ignition, turn it on, and hit the starter button. Now for the fuel injected bikes, that's all you have to do is make sure your kill switch is on and hit the starter button. For those of you that have a carbureted model, what you may have to do on the left or right hand side, there will be a little tap. It'll either have two sets of sayings on it. It'll say on, off, reserve, or it may have on, off, and prime. If you have the prime, which will be PRI, turn it to prime, turn the ignition on, and then hit the starter button. The bike may not start right away because what it's doing is it's allowing the fuel to go from the fuel tank into the carburetors and filling up the bowls. Once they're full, then you can start it. Once the bike is started, hit let it run. Make sure your garage door is open or it's outside, because it is going to smoke quite a bit because it's been sitting for a while. It's cold outside. Fuel injectant bikes are going to sense that it's cold and it's going to start dumping more fuel into it. So you will see quite a bit of smoke and steam coming out of the pipes. So don't do it with it sitting in your living room. You want to do it outside, or at least with as close to the garage door as possible with the garage door open, and let it run. What you're doing is you're letting the bike warm up. And what that's doing is it's getting all the oil moving around and getting everything lubricated. Because it's been sitting for a while. Some bikes may sound quite loud. That's normal. That'll go away after about 15-20 minutes once the bike is warmed up. As the bike is warming up, you want to make sure that all the switches work, your signals, your horn, it'll go beep beep. Make sure your brake light works with both here and the lever, and it'll actually be illuminated here. Also, you want to make sure your license plate light works as well. It's basically just a visual inspection so that you know when you go out on the road that everything is working, all your signal lights working, everyone knows that can see that you're stopping, because it is going to be a little bit of a challenge for us motorcycle riders in the springtime, because cars haven't seen us for 3 to 6 months depending on what part of Canada you live in. Also, if you do have a liquid cooled motorcycle like this one, let the fan come on and shut off. That way you know that the bike has actually reached operating temperature and it's shut off. That way you know that it's working and everything is functioning. And then you're good to go for a ride. Now be careful when you do go riding. The first time of the year, there'll be quite a bit of salt on the road. Also that the road will be, the pavement will be cold, because it'll probably be +5, +6. And the tires tend to take a lot longer to warm up, and they may also be quite hard, because we're mostly in the spring and summer, we're riding when it's about 15 to 20 degrees. So there will be quite a bit of difference in the tires to get them to warm up. When you go to stop, you may find that they are kind of slick and they don't stop as well as you thought they would when you put the bike away. And that is pretty much, once the bike is stopped and it's cooled, check your engine oil again, just to make sure that it is at the proper level, because it may go down, and it may go down to low enough that it could affect the motor. And that pretty much concludes what I have to say to do your bike prep. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.